back to the early weigh-in podcast. This week we've got UFC 273, a hell of a pay-per-view if I must say. We got two titles on the line. In the main event, it's the featherweight strap up for grabs. We got Alexander Volkanovski defending his belt against the Korean Zombie. And then in the co-main event, it's a much-anticipated rematch at bantamweight between Aljamain Sterling and Petr Yan. Man, you can't leave out the two prospects, Khamzat, Chimaev, and Garry on this card. You know, a lot of eyes going to be on them two. If you watched the podcast last week, man, hopefully we made you some money. Both of the underdogs we gave out cashed with Mateus Nicolau and Sarah McMahon. Mm-hmm. And then your prop, my best bet, actually gets canceled 30 minutes before the fight starts. But Blades inside the distance cashed with ease. Grosso money line ended up being the best and easiest bet of the night. I'm not as confident, I guess, on this card, this week. I feel like the spots are a little bit harder to find, so I'm excited to break it down and see what we like together. Continuing that streak to 4 weeks in a row, man. So good there. You got me in the hat again. I did tell you that judging in Columbus, man, doesn't get used too often. I knew it was going to be kind of shaky, and it really did, had a ton of impact on how our cards fell out, and every one of those greasy decisions it felt like we had action on.
Yeah, 100%. I look at my betting card, and I was on the right side of a lot of variance that night for sure. Thankfully, with the Alexa Grasso fight, it wasn't a sweat, like you said. I put 2.5 units on her at minus 210, beat the line, and she covered her closing line. Easy. Then looking down, I think that my worst bet was probably the Dicasey by TKO. Okay, so he was dominant in one. I just didn't know it was going to be Dicasey Nurmagomedov out there. Overall, I ended up positive 1.09 units with an 11% return on investment. I'll take it any night, but
can't go broke making profit.
For sure. Looking for a bigger night this next time. And then looking down at your card, I think that the best bet was a parlay between Blades and Khamzat. Not only did you get good numbers on them, but they also covered their price tags, I think that maybe the Borashev to win, which was a parlay, but it ended up just being a straight bet.
Never really had a chance.
Never really had a chance. He just never got that distance, and I don't know. It just didn't look it wasn't the best performance for him debuting. The one I want to talk about, though, we were both on it. You were on it early in the week. Sarah McMahon by submission at plus 700, plus 800. That was a prop that I'd take over and over and over again.
3 minutes of control time, round 1 and 2.
And
so close to hitting.
Would have significantly changed the night for the both of us.
Absolutely.
Overall, I couldn't agree more with this fight kind of being more of a viewer's card rather than a betting card, but I am extremely excited to get into this one.
I am as well, man. If you guys hanging out with us, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel.
In our main event, we have the featherweight strap up for grabs with Alexander Volkanovski versus Chan Sung Jung, also the Korean Zombie. The Korean Zombie is actually stepping in for Max Holloway, who was injured leading up to his trilogy fight with Volkanovski. And, although I love the fact that we see another top featherweight step up to take that shot, I don't think that this is going to be very competitive. And we're seeing that with the odds. Volk is coming in as the 7-1 favorite, which, I don't agree with, but I do understand that everybody's throwing him in as parlays, and he's a good parlay piece at that. Volk isn't one of my favorite fighters to watch. We know he's very defensively sound, and he's definitely kind of made it clear that he's better than all the featherweights outside of Max Holloway. And he's kind of gotten this reputation in the UFC as being a non-finisher, but I don't think that that's fair towards him. You look down at the people that he's been fighting, and the one thing that they all have in common is durability. Right. It's Elkins, Holloway, Ortega, Aldo, all very durable. And I think that this fight, we're going to see a change in that. The Korean Zombie, he's moved to fight ready with Eddie Cha and Henry Cejudo. You see Eddie Cha on the embeddeds talking about, not only do I think we'll win this fight, but I think he finishes Volk, and he didn't even sound confident saying that, man. Sadly, I think, even if we were talking about a Korean Zombie that was in his prime and didn't have that military layoff, I don't think that he would have ever been able to beat Volkanovski at this current state. So I think Volkanovski wins this way any way he wants.
Man, I'm with you, man. I'm 100% on the Volk side. Parlayed him early in the week. Dude, Zombie, absolute veteran of the sport, and I have no problem with him getting the title shot here. Makes his 10th main event in a row. He was always, people were kind of giving him shit for asking for them 3-round fights and everything, but it makes 10 in a row now for him. But truth be told, the guy's on a 1-fight win streak, and it kind of tells you where the division's at right now. In my opinion, I think a whole lot of that talent in the featherweight division is up and coming. You got Arnold Allen, you got Bryce Mitchell, Movsar, Topuria. And so the talent's a bit, sitting in that 10 through 20 range right now, and not a lot of title challengers. Where Volk, man, he's on a 20-fight win streak, and he's beaten some of the best fighters on the planet. Volk does absolutely everything well, in my opinion. Extremely strong for the weight class. His only loss comes at welterweight, and people always talk about him being like a 200-pound rugby player, and he really does carry the strength down to featherweight. Super strong in the clinch, underrated wrestling. The submission defense against Brian Ortega, man, how much he was willing to fight and dig to not lose his belt, the cardio, his volume. It's a ton of things that I love to back, when I'm going to back a fighter. With Zombie, I just don't really see a lot of the same things, It's way more counter-striking. The volume's not there, and he does have really good boxing, and he can land that, power shot on everybody. But, man, when you look at him coming back from that, military sentence, Dennis Bermudez no longer in the promotion. Moicano coming off a TKO loss and is now a lightweight because that weight cut was so bad. Frank Edgar coming off a loss to Max Holloway, now a bantamweight. Dan Ige is fringe top 15 and probably loses to the 4 talents that I just brought up, in my honest opinion. So I just personally think Alexander Volkanovski is the clear better fighter, seen the better looks, and I 100% think that the finish is on the table here as well.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the Dan Ige fight. After just getting outclassed on the feet by somebody like Ortega, it's not the win over Dan Ige. It can't hold a lot of weight in your
right.
in your breakdown for this. And one other thing, Volk flew out or is training with Brad Riddell as his main training partner for this fight. And for what it's worth, I think that's a pretty good training partner to prepare for somebody like the Korean Zombie.
You were talking about taking Volk inside the distance. You can actually get Fight Doesn't Go the distance at plus money still, where you can kind of cover both sides. And you're talking about, Volk's had them decisions lately, man, but I think Korean Zombie poses a type of fighter that he can get that finish. The co-main event, it's that much anticipated rematch for the bantamweight strap. We've got Petr Yan taking on Aljamain Sterling. Man, looking online, both of these dudes are absolutely shredded. They look in the absolute best shape of their life. It's pretty crazy. I bet Petr Yan minus 125 the first time around, and now he's sitting at like minus 400. A little bit of a change there. And to Aljamain's defense, I know that the tides were turning, but he was definitely making a case for himself on the scorecard. He was kind of doing a lot of things well. I love the teep kicks to the body. He threw a couple knees to split the high guard of Petr. And it would serve him well to go to the body. Petr Yan's like high guard reminds me of a bit like Gaethje, and if you got to go to the body, it'll drop the hands eventually. And maybe Aljo could find that kill shot, but to his defense, he did mismanage the gas tank, but that was like he had only had 90 seconds of fight time in the Corey Sandhagen fight in a whole year and a half leading up to that. But now it's been another year, and he's had neck surgery and stuff. So I don't know if the gas tank's any better. And then for Petr Yan, man, it's kind of known for taking that first round off. A bunch of people have kind of gotten ahead of him on the scorecards, and he just keeps coming with that methodical breakdown. I've been real high on my boy. Superb grappling, superb striking. I think Petr Yan has potential to actually get Aljo out of here, man.
Yeah, so I think we're looking at this pretty similarly. For what it's worth, I think both of these guys are kind of tired of the controversy surrounding this. Even though the odds, like you said, aren't really suggesting that this is going to be a close fight, as Peter's closing in as a 5-1 favorite, I think we're in for an all-time great bantamweight championship fight right here, man. You look at Aljo; he's got the second most wins in bantamweight history, and although he has kind of been promoting the paperweight champ and everything, he actually does look like he's in the best shape of his life.
Does, man.
But I do think that his path to victory is the same as last time. He's got his best chance early in round 1, a quick back take similar to the Corey Sandhagen fight. Because being honest with you, Yan doesn't have a lot of defensive holes, and you brought up Yan kind of taking that first round to download information. It doesn't get better as the fight goes longer. And, I'll be honest with you, when I look at who Aljo's training with, I don't love it. I'm not going to sit here and diss a legend like Ray Longo, but he's not my first option at this point in the
and
MMA
you see Aljo
game.
kind of changing over to Extreme Couture and stuff a little bit, maybe
Right.
you're seeing the same thing.
Exactly. And the next two immediate influences he has in his camp are the real estate agent Alaquinta and his main striking partner, Merab Davishvili. Like, I watched a little bit of Merab and Aljo sparring. It's awful. I mean, Merab's spamming that spinning back fist, and it just doesn't look that great. Yan, he spent the last 3 months at Tiger Muay Thai for this camp.
With Volk some.
Yeah, with Volk some. And he's quoted in saying that he also doesn't think that Aljo's going to come out as hot as he did, and I have to agree with him.
Right.
I think that, when I look at these fighters, fighter for fighter, like skill for skill, I think Jan has the cardio edge, the striking edge, and that good enough defensive grappling to negate the wrestling of Aljo. He is the rightful favorite, but this is MMA, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. Once you get these fighters started getting into the 5-1, 6-1, 7-1 favorites,
in such a high level fight like this,
right? You have to find different ways to play them outside of parlaying them at that price. So for me, I agree. I think Aljo is going to give a good fight, but I think Jan's the rightful favorite and will dominate in this fight.
So they fight doesn't go the distance. They only have that set at -120. That's a bit tempting to me because it has some bad blood behind it. It is a rematch, and it reminds me of when we bet Usman and Masvidal. That went the full 5 rounds on Masvidal short notice the first time, and we got a phenomenal number for it to finish, and it finishes in like round 2. What do you think about that number?
No, I think that's a good read. I mean, when we talk about the downloading of information from Jan, well, he's got 4 rounds banked of downloaded information, and I can't imagine that Aljo is going to come off of this neck injury with a completely different game plan for this fight. So we might get into the action way quicker than last fight, and it might end sooner, like you said. And now moving on to the people's main event, Khamzat Chimaev versus Gilbert Burns. An absolutely huge step up for Khamzat to finally show the world that his hype train is backed up with legit skills. For sure, the most dominant contender that I've seen in recent memory, and if you can find some comparisons, I guarantee they took more than one punch up in their first 4 UFC fights. We've heard all the rumors over the years about Khamzat in the training room. He's got an unbreakable mentality, an insane work ethic. He's huge for the division. His wrestling skills are legit. Where you look at Gilbert and he's realistically, he's one of the top 5 welterweights in the world, and rightfully so, but I don't think that he has the skill set here or the physical attributes that someone would have to possess to beat a guy like Khamzat. Gilbert's a black belt world champion in jiu-jitsu, and I honestly think we're more likely to see him get tossed around the cage than Chimaev. These two guys are on opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to size at welterweight, and I think Khamzat has the options to keep this fight standing or bully him to the ground like we saw him do against Jack Hermanson just a couple months ago.
I'm excited as hell for this fight, man. And if Khamzat loses, my night's done for, to be honest with you.
You and me both.
And part of me, it hates that I'm so invested in a 10-0 fighter taking his first big step up. And the other part of me, probably the general consensus out there, I think Khamzat's the real deal, man. And it's a person that I'm comfortable putting that kind of change on. That clip this week has come out of Brian Stan talking about, Khamzat not even name dropping, and now we're kind of figuring out who that is. And Khamzat wasn't even, I don't even know if he had a professional fight yet.
Yeah, it was in 2017.
Exactly.
Brian Stan
He's in there besting guys like Gustafsson and Latifi, and so I think the sky's the limit for him, honestly, man. I think his wrestling, like you said, is absolutely top notch. The takedown entries on Lee the Leech, that's as clean as it gets, You
don't see that in UFC.
You don't. The right hand on Gerald Meerschaert, holy shit, man. Middleweights don't throw a right hand that quick, and he absolutely deaded him so much that people are trying to fade Meerschaert like crazy. And now he's on like a 2 or 3 fight win streak, And then you talk about the work ethic. In practice, I don't necessarily think that this is a guy you got to worry about going out there and blowing his wad, after round 1. I really do think that he's got cardio for days. He seems to be the full package, much bigger, much stronger. And I think he's going to knock Gilbert Burns out, man, to be honest with you. When I watch some of the Gilbert Burns fights, he's knocked out at lightweight by Dan Hooker, who I don't necessarily think has all the power in the world, Dan Hooker also snatched up a guillotine a couple times and really made that fight close. Damian Maia took the back multiple times and stuff in round 1. Man, I think Khamzat Chimaev, like I said, is the real deal, and I think he's got Gilbert Burns beat everywhere.
I couldn't agree more. I almost think that he takes this as a challenge, and that's why I've played the submission prop for Khamzat. I think he looks at this as like, people think that his ground game's good, I'll show him mine's better. Yeah. And that first round's going to be a shit show for Gilbert Burns.
I absolutely love that stab on the sub. I hope he goes up there and, like he told GM3, I'm going to take your black belt if I submit you. I like how he talks the shit outside the cage, but he's actually a pretty humble dude at the same time. When he choked Lee the Leech out, man, that's a big moment for you. And he didn't throw the leech off of him and everything. He literally stayed there for like 10 seconds, let them wake the leech up, get out from underneath him. Like, he's a good dude, man. And he's a guy I like to back with almost 50% of my 10 allotted units on Saturday.
Moving on to our fight of the night segment, I'm going to go with the heavyweight fight between Rozenstruik versus Marcin Tybura. Personally, I love when two big boys get into the cage, and out of the two options between them or Olenek and Vandera, this is definitely the higher level of heavyweights. I'll be the first to say that I don't see the ceiling for either of these guys being that heavyweight strap, but I do think that both of them will serve their purpose and being legitimate tests for the future contenders before breaking into that top 10. 100%. I almost messed up betting Tybura earlier this week because I thought the odds were going to flip to him being the favorite, but sure enough, they've steadily gone up from the plus 110 opener all the way to a plus 130 and rising from what it looks like. I think looking at it from a public perspective, it's easy to get sucked into like the highlight reel KOs that Rozenstruik has delivered in the UFC. And, you know, whether it's him or Derek Lewis or Francis Ngannou, it's always, you know, special when you see somebody who has the type of power where even with a glancing blow, you can knock somebody out. And, you know, it's a testament to Rozenstruik's kickboxing career. He's definitely a world-class kickboxer, but I think his MMA skill set's a little limited. From what I've seen, he stands flat-footed, which is good for, you know, sitting down on his counter punches, and that's probably where the majority of his power comes from. But we've seen him struggle when he faces guys with better movement, like Alistair Overeem for 4.5 rounds and Cyril Gane. And then, you know, with his last fight against Curtis Blades, we also see the grappling holes, which is expected from somebody with a kickboxing background. I look at Marcin Tybura and I see a clear path to victory. It is to embrace the grind, man. I think if he takes a similar approach to the way he has in his 5-fight win streak before he fought Volkov, he'll have an absolute field day here. Since those back-to-back KO losses from Shamil and Augusto Sakai, he's taken that entertainment factor of his game and thrown it out the window. He, you know, from what I can tell, he's not trying to produce exciting fights. Instead, he's strictly focusing on getting that W, and that usually entails closing in on that striking range, pushing his opponents up against the fence, and trying to negate the power that they have. After that, you know, when he is pursuing that or putting on that pressure, sometimes his opponents will wilt under that pressure, and we saw that in the Hardy and the Walt Harris wins, which that's a Walt Harris fight for you, you know, but for what it's worth, he's able to endure that initial rush of Walt Harris, which a lot of people can't. And I thought that showed improvements in his game for sure. All that being said, we're talking about heavyweights here, and you know, Tybura has shown some chin issues in the past, which is why I likely won't track this bet. But I am picking him to win this fight, and I think that this is a fight that people should stay on their feet for because it could end in KO, or we could just see Marcin Tybura outclass as an underdog.
Man, I think it's a killer fight. The odds are, you know, super, super close to start the week, and it's one that I've kind of, you know, we talked about all week. I've kind of flipped back and forth, and I don't really... You know, when I look at the money line, Rozenstruik getting up to like a minus 160, it's definitely dog or pass. But if you're on the side of Rozenstruik, his KO prop is plus 125, and that's the way I play it. I told you earlier, I don't know if he's ever technically won a round on the judges' scorecards. You know, he lost every single round to Gane, every single round to Blades.
Every round to Overeem.
Exactly, before the KO. He lost round 1 to Albini and Junior Dos Santos, and then the rest of them are round 1 knockouts. So on the judges' scorecard, I don't know if he's capable of winning a decision just because he doesn't throw, you know. And you talk about styles, and dude, styles make fights, and Tybura has 100% a path to victory, and that's like you said, make it dirty, put him up against the cage, dirty box him, wear him down, and mix in a takedown or two. But Tybura, man... He's been hurt so many times on the feet by lesser strikers, Greg Hardy, you know, Walt Harris, and those kind of people don't have the gas tank to back it up and keep going, where Jairzinho's not more of that offensive striker. He's not one to waste the gas tank. He's more one to kind of sit back, and he'll absolutely wait until, you know, 24 minutes and 59 seconds before going forward and landing that kill shot. And it reminds me a little bit of Tybura all over Derek Lewis for more than 3 rounds and then gets deaded in the last minute. And so Rozenstruik has that kill shot, and so it makes me want to stay away from Tybura's money line. But Tybura decision only on DraftKings is -165, and it's different, but man, I like that for a ton of obvious reasons.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you're not getting any value whenever you look at the Rozenstruik by finish only, because they've got that juice to -300.
Right.
So they know how it's going to go, and I do like that prop a lot.
Fight that I wanted to highlight, I think I'm going to go with Makenzie Dern and Tecia Torres. It's a big-time matchup, man, at strawweight. You got one of our favorite fighters, Makenzie Dern, trying to get back on track here. And then Tecia Torres sneakily, trying to get that win streak up to 4 in a row now. With Makenzie Dern, the striking is definitely coming along, man, but she's sort of a one-trick pony, at this point. I feel like Tecia has a clear striking advantage, a clear speed advantage, footwork. She's got the whole cage to work with here. But, man, outside of Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and who just doesn't wrestle, and Sam Hughes on short notice, Tecia Torres has been taken down by every single one of her opponents in every one of the other UFC fights that she has. And one takedown with Makenzie Dern, can spell trouble, and she has potential to end it, as soon as the fight hits the mat. Tecia Torres, she's kind of been used as a litmus test kind of lately, for kind of see where girls are at. Brianna Van Buren, and then Sam Hughes. And then Angela Hill's probably the best one, but she's damn near 40, But the only girls to beat Tecia Torres are world-class girls. The 4 girls that have beat her, 3 of them have held the belt. Marina Rodriguez, I think, is going to hold the belt one day probably, and I'm quick to put Dern in that category of girls, man. But it's a clear path on the mat for one girl. It's a clear path on the feet for the other girl. I don't know if I play Makenzie Dern at -120 when her sub prop is north of +200, +240, +250. I think that's how she probably wins this one, but I think it's almost just as likely that Tecia, out hustles her to a decision here for 15 minutes. And so it's not the most exciting fight on the card, and I probably don't have a bet, but I think it's a fight you should keep an eye on, man. I think it's going to be a pretty good one. The winner jumps right back up to the top of the division. My heart wants Dern, man, but my head and my gut keeps telling me Ticia's gonna gut out a decision here, man. I think I'm going to pass, but I think it's going to be a pretty good fight.
Yeah, I'm also torn on this fight, and I agree that it's going to be a good one. The finishing upside, definitely on Dern, like you said, but I do worry about her wrestling chops, and that's kind of always been the story of her fight, is if she can get it to the ground. And up until this point, her entries haven't looked to be, developing how I wanted them to be developing at this stage in her UFC career. And then not to mention, with Tecia Torres, she's 5'1". It's tough to get in on those hips. Yeah. She's extremely strong, and I didn't know that about the takedowns that she had given up in fights past, but probably better wrestlers than Makenzie Dern. And I think that Tecia is very likely to just point fight this way, bunch of he-yahs, and get the nod on the judges' scorecard. Although Dern is our girl, and I love that sub prop that you were talking about. In our fighter to watch segment, I'm going to be choosing Aspen Ladd, and I'm picking her as my fighter to watch because of the implications this fight might have on her career trajectory. Yeah. She's only 26 years old. She kind of has some unanswered questions, and since entering the UFC, this is her first time as an underdog, and we're seeing her as a +165 against a veteran in Raquel Pennington. She's only 5'6", but she's very strong. She has a very big, a wide frame, which pairs excellent with her grappling style of attack. And, as you take a look at her UFC career, she's never had a good weight cut to 135. Right. She's had multiple close calls during fight week, as well as having to pull out of her fight with Macy Chiasson in her last, in her fight before last. Then getting rebooked, she goes up to fight 145 against Norma Dumont, which ended up not, showing it that it obviously is not her weight class. Right. She didn't have near the grappling chops up there. She wasn't nearly as big, and she wasn't even able to land one single takedown over 15 minutes. Now she's coming back down to 135 against Pennington, and this is probably her toughest test to date, and it's a great opportunity to prove that she belongs in the top of that weight class. But that's all if she can get her weight in order, and I would stay away from this fight until she makes weight. Yep. But I do think that she actually is a solid underdog option as well if she can implement that style of game. Raquel Pennington's only getting older, and I think that this is a great opportunity for the 26-year-old prospect to really showcase her skills and put her on the map.
Yeah, I think she's like 6 years younger than Raquel Pennington and stuff, and you're right. if you're going to play lad, 100%, you should need to wait till she makes the scales, because the Jermaine Durandamine fight, she shows up awful on the scales and then gets slept with the first. I wouldn't say slept, but dropped with the first punch and stuff. So the weight cut definitely seems to take a bit out of her performance. And Rocky Pennington is gonna bring a high paced fight that's gonna involve a lot of grappling and stuff. I think the girls honestly are kind of like a mirror image to each other in the way that they like to fight and try to be the bully. Haspin lad to me doesn't really like when she's not the bully a little bit more. Rocky I think is a little bit more tough, has a little bit more heart to her. So man, that's another fight that I don't think I can put my money on. But yeah, it's getting to be one of them wide MMA women's lines. For me, fighter to watch, it's going to be Ian Garry, man. I think somebody you got to talk about here on this card. I actually got him at -184 on FanDuel. He's -365 right now and absolutely killed that opening line. He captured the welterweight title in Cage Warriors, and so he's got a ton of hype behind him. Paddy Pimblett, Conor McGregor, kind of the same aura and feeling that Ian Garry's trying to bring with him. And the UFC seems to really like this guy. They debut him on the UFC pay-per-view in Madison Square Garden. He trains out of a great camp in Sanford MMA with a lot of guys who seems to be pretty high on him too. He's a pretty good grappler, man. You just don't really see it that much because he prefers to stay on the feet. He's got some pretty decent footwork. He has that right head kick he likes to throw in, and a little bit similar to Conor McGregor, man. He likes to kind of bounce around on the feet and hit that back step counter right hand. He kind of likes to let people lure him into that dead space. And watching that round one against Jordan Williams, he timed it perfect, man. At the last minute, Jordan Williams kept throwing that left hand like 3 different times, and you could just see it. He was reading it and finally sniped on it. But that debut was a bit shaky, I'm not going to lie. In my opinion, you're talking about a 24-year-old kid, he's got a ton of weight on his shoulders. He's making his debut in Madison Square Garden. And I know Jordan Williams I don't even know if he's with the company anymore, if I'm honest with you, but the guy had 3 fights on the Contender Series. He's already had 2 or 3 fights in the UFC. He's been there before, and Ian Garry was open about how nervous he was, and I'm not as overly critical as some people are on that debut. I actually kind of like to see him get tested a little bit, and get tagged and see that chin a little bit. But at the same time, I'd be pretty ignorant if I ignored some of the things. His striking defense is not the best. He leaves that inside leg kick to just be chopped down at. I just think that he is in a great spot on Saturday to get a finish over Darian Weeks. I get the line right now is getting a bit crazy, but Ian Garry inside the distance -110 I think is a good play. I think he potentially goes out here and finishes Darian Weeks.
I like how you mentioned the aura about him. You're paying the Paddy tax, McGregor tax on Ian Garry here, and at -360, definitely not justifiable. But if I could get him at -184, I'd also be taking a stab on him. You talked about him being a little bit hittable in that Jordan Williams fight. Jordan Williams made some technical striking errors in that fight that made me question why he was ever in the UFC.
Jordan Williams knocked out RoboCop.
100%, but RoboCop's a little bit of a punching bag himself. He just can punch harder than most every other guy. I like Darian Weeks at the odds that we're getting him by TKO. We're seeing like +750 him by TKO, and with the hitability of Ian Garry, this isn't like this is another pay-per-view. This isn't an easy fight card to be fighting on himself. He's headlining prelims. If he wants to put that pressure on him, and if he has those jitters again, I think Darian Weeks is somebody who can mix in the wrestling, but also throw some pretty nasty hooks as well.
Nothing to lose here either,
Yeah, nothing to lose. So where this line has been moved over the week, I think that the value's on the Weeks side, but the Weeks by KO props. Ian Garry just still has a lot to prove, and I personally don't think you're getting the best of competition over there at Cage Warriors, so this is his time to kind of prove me wrong. For our Underdogs segment, I am going to be stealing from my fight of the night. It's Marcin Tybura, man. I think he has the perfect skill set to beat the striker in Rozenstruik, and I truly believe there's a little bit of highlight reel bias baked into that Rozenstruik line. As long as Tybura sticks to that game plan by closing the distance, not getting caught closing that distance, and just grinding it out, I think we should have yet another underdog cash here.
Hey, man, styles make fights, and if you want to look at how this, could go, Tybura, I think, has more upside to grind this fight out to a decision if he wants to. I told you I've already played that decision only for him, I like Tybura as a dog, too. I actually think that the prelims... And I could make some cases for quite a few dogs on the prelims. I think Mark Madsen was super live, and he was at like +135 earlier in the week. Kay Hansen was a minus 150, and now she's plus money. Josh Frimm's making his UFC debut, and they've got him as a pretty significant underdog. So, I mean, I think there's a ton of close fights that you can make cases for underdogs on the prelims, not necessarily the pay-per-view, but definitely on the prelims. But me, man, Mickey Gall, I took him at plus 140, thinking everybody was going to kind of see what I did, kind of like Sarah McMahon and stuff last week. And now he's north of plus 170 and stuff, so I might be looking to hit him again. Gall has legitimately been underneath the bright lights since his third professional fight. His third professional fight, he was on a pay-per-view, one fight under the co-main event, fighting CM Punk. And CM Punk is not the best fighter in the world, but imagine being the MMA fighter that lost, to CM Punk. He kind of had some pressure and things on him, and he's went the distance with Randy Brown and Alex Morona, who are established veterans in the division. And now he's made the move to Sanford MMA. He's still pretty young, man. I think he's going to make steady progressions each time out. We saw some improvements in the Jordan Williams fight. His hands look improved. He actually, I know he submitted him, but he pretty much knocked him out before he submitted him. And then when I look at Mike Malott, man, he's not as big as Mickey Gall. There's times where he was making 145, 155 pounds. He's taken, 2 years off before he did come back as a welterweight. And that's kind of been the storybook of his career, has been inconsistent fighting, because he's had like another 2-year layoff earlier in his career. The guy has seen outside of round one just one time, I think, in the last 5 years. And then the chin's a little bit suspect too. He got knocked out by a featherweight in Hakeem Dawodu, and I know Hakeem Dawodu's his UFC career is going pretty good, but I think he's got like one finish in his 8 UFC fights, and hasn't been much of a finisher on the UFC's level. And then when you look at his cardio, there's been multiple fights where he's up a round and then comes out round 2 completely gassed. And then now he's back at welterweight. We look at Solomon Renfro. Solomon Renfro got passed up by Dana White. Dana White said, "I don't think you're UFC ready, even though you won on the Contender Series. I don't think you're ready." Solomon Renfro just got knocked out in the first round in one of his next fights afterwards. So Dana doesn't think you're UFC level. I don't hold much weight over that win, to be honest with you. And Solomon Renfro actually dropped Mike Malott like twice before Malott won. And then when you look at who he beat, the Shimons Smotrowski or whatever on the Contender Series, that kid is 21 years old, and it's like you beat a kid, man. And so nothing really tells me Mike Malott is deserving of a minus 200 price tag. He seems to be a first round or bust guy, and if he doesn't run through Mickey Gall in round 1, I think Mickey Gall is 100% live to take this one.
Yeah, so I like Mickey Gall at underdog odds. I'll say overall, you're guessing on this fight a little bit. Who's to know what Mike Mallott's going to come in and be like you said, hasn't really seen the UFC caliber of competition, and on the feet I imagine he's going to have quite the advantage here,
probably a little bit.
And Mickey Gall in the past, he hasn't shown the best gas tank, but you're right, he has been going to decision with a whole lot better guys than Mike Malott. But his wins don't hold much weight either, so although I like him here. This is a great spot for him to kind of prove that he does belong in the UFC, because outside of that Jordan Williams win, he's kind of had a lackluster career himself. So, at 30 years old for Mickey Gall, this is kind of his time where he needs to start putting together a win streak to stay in the UFC. So I like it. We move on to the prop bet section of our podcast, and I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, but I'm doubling down on it. The Volk inside the distance at plus 185. He has been wrongfully given a reputation as not being a finisher, and you've got to take his opponent's durability into account whenever you're calling him not a finisher. You look up in his regional scene all the way up through the UFC and a couple of finishes in the UFC, he's demolishing guys. Yeah. He's absolutely demolishing guys, and Korean Zombie has been finished in 3 of his last 4 losses. I think this is a prime spot for Volk to get that finish and the dominant belt defense here.
Yeah, man, I love the line on that. I think that's absolutely crazy. I think he's 100% liable to get a finish here over Zombie, who's going to be trying to box with him and stuff. And yeah, I think he gets it done inside the distance. I opted to take fight doesn't go the distance, but yeah, I think a finish is on the table in the main event too. My prop is going to be Mark Madsen by decision. I almost took him as my dog, but it was like plus 115 now that I could get to it, and I can get his decision prop at plus 280, and I don't tell you the last time he's finished anybody, to be honest with you. It reminds me of my Sarah McMahon play a lot last week. It's a high level of wrestling. It's an Olympic medalist type of wrestling that you get to back at plus money here, man. That's something that I would do almost every single day. And then it almost resembles the cardio that people are talking about in the Sarah McMahon, and
exactly.
Man, he's been to so many decisions. And it's like, I don't necessarily think that his cardio is just an all-out, issue for him. Austin Hubbard, that's a hard dude to hold down who trains at elevation, a big, tall dude. I think that's, someone with great cardio, and that's why round 3 got kind of sketch. But for Vince Pichel, man, Vince Pichel's got a 25% takedown defense. Takedown defense has really been an issue for him in the past. And I know we didn't see Mark, shoot any takedowns against Guida. It's pretty common when you see two wrestlers fight each other that they end up becoming strikers. But, man, I think he shoots all the way here. Hubbard landed multiple takedowns on Pichel. Jim Miller took round 1 easily before he gassed on Pichel. Roosevelt Roberts took round 1 as well. Gregor Gillespie, 7 takedowns. Gregor's got better jiu-jitsu, and I think that's why he found the finish. But I think Madsen is perfectly capable of taking round 1 and 2. And with Pichel having 1 TKO since 2012, I'm not necessarily worried about the power coming back his way. Round 3 could potentially get a little bit sketch, but I'm not saying a 30-27's off the table for the Olympic wrestler, man.
Yeah, I really like that play. The comparison to Sarah McMahon's amazing. Does it kind of make you want to play the sub prop for Mark Madsen, who has gotten a couple of submissions? It's sitting at plus 950 right now.
That is tempting, but just because I think majority of the fight is going to take place on the mat.
Just like the Sarah McMahon fight, right?
Exactly.
Just dominant in those first couple of rounds, and so anything's possible. But the decision prop, I couldn't agree more with that. He's definitely going to secure those first 2 rounds. Yeah. So if all you're having to miss out on is that 3rd round, he should get the 2 out of the 3 rounds on the judges' scorecards. Moving on to our best bet segment, I have chose the under 2.5 for Burns Chimaev, sitting at minus 175.
Stupid line.
Yeah, we're pretty big on Chimaev, and if you don't want to just bank on Chimaev getting this done, I think there is some finishing upside for Burns, and it's only 10 points more to take the under 2.5 than Chimaev inside the distance. I think it's a really simple breakdown, man. Chimaev has never gone past 1.5 rounds, and Burns has gotten finished in his last couple of losses.
Jabs by Kamaru Usman,
Right, and then on top of that, we've never seen Chimaev in the round 3. We've seen Burns keep the submission threat throughout the fight, right. And so I think they're both live for getting the finish here. It's just a phenomenal way to play this fight, and I think we're both on it pretty heavy.
Yeah, man, under 2.5 in that fight is absolutely killer. I'm taking another under 2.5. I'm gonna go back to Mickey Gall versus Mike Malott, under 2.5, same price tag, minus 175. You heard a lot of reasons why I think this fight has potential to have a finish. 12 of their 14 combined wins, that's 86%, come in the first round alone. And I'm getting under 2.5 here. You very well could see Mike Malott just absolutely come in here and run through Mickey Gall in round 1 like he has majority of his opponents. But guess what, man? When he does not get them out of there in the first round, he's got a draw on his record. After a 10-8 round 1, he's got a draw on his record after dropping the next 2. He's been lost to Hakeem Dawodu after having a good round 1 and then getting slept in round 2. The brakes fall off for this guy after round 1, and he's only putting on more weight. He's taken years off, man. I think there's a 100% finish for 100% chance that each guy has the finish on the table, man. I don't even really say that one guy has a clear finishing upside over the other. I think both guys can finish this fight, and I love that price tag. I got
it. Moving on to our final segment, we have the quick picks. And in the first fight of the night, we have Julio Arce taking on Daniel Dos Santos in the bantamweight division. Personally, I'm leaning Julio Arce, although that price tag doesn't look too appealing to me.
I'm with you, man. I don't know much about Daniel Santos. I think it's a fight that I'm staying away from. I don't want to lay minus 200 on Arce, who just got knocked out. Mm-hmm. But I think he could win easy. Mm-hmm. And then in the strawweight, Kay Hansen coming back down, taking on the newcomer Pierre Rodriguez. A fight I'm going to completely stay away from. I told you Pierre walks forward and throws heat, and that can take you a ways in women's MMA. But I think Kay Hansen could find the sub here, man. I'm gonna take Kay Hansen.
Yeah, stay away fight for sure. But I'm actually going to go with the public, and who's betting Rodriguez down to a favorite. I surely won't be playing her, but I do think that she'll probably edge this one out. Moving on to our third fight of the night, we have Anthony Fluffy Hernandez taking on Josh Fremd at middleweight. I cashed big on Anthony Hernandez his last fight out, and I'm actually looking to fade him at this point. I think he's kind of getting a juiced price tag because of his big Rodolfo Vieira win, so I'm going with the underdog here in Josh Fremd.
I'm actually taking a dog shot on Josh Fremd as well, man. You know, he's just coming off a win. He's been active. He's a massive middleweight. Fluffy's, I don't know, man.
He's mediocre at best all around.
He is, man. So, yeah, I'm going to take a dog shot at Josh Fremd as well. Another fight that, goddamn, just stay away from. Alexei Oleinik versus Jared Vanderaa. You know, I've seen Jared Vanderaa out-wrestled before, but by bigger, stronger wrestlers. Oleinik is more of a submission before a wrestler. If Vanderaa gets it down there, it could get tricky, but I think he's also a big slob that could just lay on top. So, Vanderaa by decision.
I think Alexei, he wants that 60th win pretty bad. And as far as opponents in the UFC, he can get that 60th win over. I think this is a pretty good shot for him.
I like it.
Moving on, fifth fight of the night. Mickey Gall taking on Mike Mallet at welterweight. I don't know enough about Mallet. I think I'm going to ride with you on Mickey Gall here.
Nice, man. I think there's some inconsistencies with Mallet as well. And for a guy who's shown those inconsistencies and just off a contender series, big price tag. I think there's value on Mickey Gall. Mm-hmm. Moving up, Aspen Ladd taking on Raquel Pennington. Man, it's another one of those fights where it's probably going to hit the scorecards and you're probably going to sweat it. Give me Raquel Pennington.
Yes. Okay, so I actually am going to lean Ladd here. Like I said, huge spot for her to kind of show up and make her presence in the bantamweight known. She just has to get past her first fight of the week, which is the weight cut.
Yeah.
Moving on, seventh fight of the night, we got two big boys in Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Marcin Tybura. As you guys know, Tybura is my underdog of the week, and I think he gets this one done.
So Tybura decision only is the best bet, I think, on that one. It's hard for me to bank against Rozenstruik's power when Tybura's been hit so many times recently. So I'll go head to head with you on it. I'll take Jairzinho. In the prelim main event, fighter I highlighted, Ian Garry taking on Darian Weeks. I think the guys are pretty damn near similar, in experience level, and I just got to go with the guy that I think the UFC wants to hype up. You know, they're going to give him some good matchups, Ian Garry.
At the current price tag, I'd take a stab on Weeks, but I agree. I think Garry should get this done, and it's a pretty good opponent for him to get a second dub in the UFC. Ninth fight of the night, we see Vince from Hell Pichel taking on Mark Madsen at lightweight. Damn, this one's a tough one. No, Pichel opened as the underdog, but was quickly bet to the favorite. I got to go with the books on this one, and I think Madsen should be the favorite, and I'll be picking him.
Yeah, man. I don't necessarily agree with this one being moved up to the main card. I think one of the other two we just talked about could have. Mm-hmm. At plus money, back in Olympic caliber wrestling is something that I can really get behind, man.
Yeah.
Mark Madsen. Big fight, man. Makenzie Dern, Tecia Torres. That's our girl. My heart wants her to win, but my gut and my head tells me over and over again, Ticia's a better fighter here, man. So as much as I hate it, Tecia Torres.
Yeah, really tough fight to call, man. I wanna bet Dern, and I'm gonna let my heart take over. So I'll take Dern in this one. Moving on, people's main event: Gilbert Burns versus Khamzat Chimaev at 170. No question, we got Khamzat here.
Absolutely, Khamzat Chimaev, man. Co-main event, big rematch. Think we're probably in the same boat. Line is stupid compared to what it used to be, man, but I think Petr Yan does beat Aljamain Sterling on Saturday.
Yeah, I think Yan edges out pretty much everywhere, skill for skill, so I'm also taking Yan. And in our main event, we have Alexander Volkanovski taking on the Korean Zombie for the featherweight championship. I don't love the price tag at Volk right now, but I do think that he's the rightful favorite here.
100%, man, and it's absolutely crazy that you can get almost 2-1 inside the distance on a guy who's approaching a minus 800 favorite at this point. I think Volk's got him covered everywhere, man. Yeah, and I think the finish is on the table. Volkanovski on Saturday.
Love it.
Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. That wraps up everything. Make sure to leave a like to the video. Comment on it if you can as well, and sub to the channel. We'll see you guys next week.
Peace.